a quarterback in the draft, early in the draft this year.
Super Bowl over future. I firmly believe that. You know that you are a player away from jumping Seattle and maybe overcoming them for next year. You have so many of your pieces back. And coming off of the season that you saw Matthew Stafford have, you need to add, realistically, a starting high-level corner and a speed pass rusher. I'll never get over Booger McFarland telling me last year, the Rams got a bunch of good bull rushers. They need a speed rusher, a guy that can win right now. And so this defense that led them down or let them down last year, really on that final stretch and certainly in that NFC Championship game, as much as I love the pairing of Ty Simpson and Sean McVay, and it makes sense for 2028-29, you have 2 first-round picks. The Super Bowl is so much more important than your future.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. You go all in. This was pretty clearly the second best team in football last season. And it was a team with, I think, weaknesses that they can address because they were so clear. Pass defense being the primary need. The Rams haven't really invested a lot at the cornerback position in recent years, going back to really since when they traded for Jalen Ramsey. I think they need to be similarly aggressive this offseason.
Correct.
Both with their early draft picks. I would also look at free agency. A guy like a Jamel Dean, for example, who's older, but, you can bring on this year as like an all-in type player, the final piece. To me, it is worth investing heavily there. I would also, though, look to add on the offensive line and maybe another receiver, but pass defense was so obviously the problem with this team, and they do have the resources this offseason to fix it.
If not the Rams, then where should Simpson be taken, and who do you have in mind for him?
If I were the Arizona Cardinals at number 3, I would try and trade down to somewhere in that teen area and take him. Yes, 3 is probably too rich, because of the starts, but Arizona trading down from 3 and getting him somewhere in the teens, I like. 6 at Cleveland, I still sit there and say probably a little too high, even though I love the young man's game. And then you're getting into that conversation. I will once again sit here and tell everybody, if you're the Miami Dolphins and you are deciding to move on from Tua and Malik Willis, it may not work financially for you, I would entertain drafting him at number 11. I do think that if you are really liking Ty Simpson, it probably makes sense that you're going to have to jump the Rams to feel comfortable above 13.
Interesting. Miami will be looking for a low-cost solution if they're carrying $99 million in dead money.
Exactly.
If they cut Tua Tagovailoa. I want to go back to that article I co-wrote with Jeremy Fowler where we go through the info we learned at last week's Combine. I urge everyone to go read it. It's extremely well written and full of great information. We'll talk about Baltimore, where the Ravens would like to get a contract extension done with quarterback Lamar Jackson, whose salary cap number goes up to $74.5 million this season. Haven't made much progress there yet. They have automatic conversion rights in the contract, so they can, convert salary to bonus and knock down that cap number without his permission, add some void years on the end of the deal. But they prefer to do it via a contract extension. Of course, as we all know, Lamar Jackson does not use an agent, and that has complicated contract conversations in the past. So we know he's going to be on the Ravens, whether it's on a new contract or just playing around with the current one. So with him locked in, what does Baltimore need to focus on this offseason on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, interior offensive line, specifically if they lose Tyler Linderbaum as well, but really their guards. That was one of the storylines of last year. As poor as some of the parts of their offense played, their interior offensive line fell apart. And if they're going to lose their star center in free agency, they're going to need 3 new starting interior offensive linemen in Baltimore. That's got to be their focus.
All right, to Indianapolis, where the Colts have 2 prominent free agents they're trying to keep. Those would be quarterback Daniel Jones and wide receiver Alec Pierce. You can only tag 1 player per year, so the hope is to get a long-term deal done with at least one of them before tomorrow's tag deadline. If they don't get Daniel Jones signed, it's possible they use the transition tag on him, which would then allow Pierce to hit the open market, where he's expected to generate significant interest. Mina Shefty talked about this situation a little bit earlier in the show. What do you make of the way the Colts are handling this?
We'll see what they do. If they were to tag Jones and let Pierce walk, that would confuse me, frankly, because it would imply that they're afraid of Daniel Jones hitting the market. But Daniel Jones injured his Achilles in week 14. So I guess I just don't quite understand how the market for him would be that robust amongst teams that need a quarterback immediately. Whereas Pierce, I expect to have a very robust market given his skill set and how good he was last year as a deep threat. So I'll be honest, if they were to go that path, it's not something that I personally would agree with, and I would find a little bit confusing. If you're Indy, you have to be scared to death of Minnesota.
Yep.
Scared to death of them, because I firmly believe that if he became if he became somewhat available, Minnesota would absolutely jump all over him, even with the injury. Even though he's not playing for. Yeah, right. Yeah. I think I don't know what the time frame. But I still think that you're banking on him, or you're betting on him in being available for a chunk of the season. He might miss, certainly the start of the season. But I still think if you're Indianapolis, you've got to be very, and that's why when I hear the transition tag, I'm shocked that Indianapolis would roll that dice on that player, because they finally found one, and if they transition tag him, I just wouldn't be surprised. It does sound like they're trying to get a deal done by tomorrow's deadline. I do believe Minnesota would be interested if somehow he did get loose from Indianapolis, but maybe then they'd have to add someone else who could play early in the season. Adam, what do you got on the Colts?
Well, listen, here's why the transition tag would make some sense. The franchise tag is about $45 million. The transition tag is about $8 million cheaper, $37 million. The Vikings still are cap strapped. They don't have a whole lot of financial flexibility. So what team out there right now would be willing to step out to create a creative offer sheet for Daniel Jones that the Colts would have a tough time matching? I think that's what the Colts would be gambling on if they went the transition route, to try to save $8 million against their cap that they could use elsewhere on their roster. Now, we'll see ultimately what they do. They're still trying to get him signed to a long-term deal, and maybe that will happen here in the next 24 hours. But certainly the transition tag would be in play in addition to the franchise tag.
Yeah, just to remind people, franchise tag means someone could come in with an offer, but they'd have to give you 2 first-round picks if he went to that team. Transition tag, you don't get anything if he takes an offer from another team that you don't want to match. So that, in addition to the price.
Well, then a running back trade with ramifications for both teams. The Detroit Lions traded David Montgomery to the Houston Texans for a 4th-round pick this year, a 7th-round draft pick next year, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs. And so now it's a situation where Detroit gets back that particular compensation. The Texans get a running back to improve their red zone, to work as their lead back, to help complement the rookie running back Woody Marks, with Nick Chubb now expected to become a free agent here next week. And the Texans feel like they've upgraded in the backfield with a 29-year-old running back who was one of the heart and souls of the Detroit offense and locker room. Exactly the kind of player that the Texans were looking for. The Lions, in turn, obviously know that Jahmyr Gibbs has to be the guy. They'd like to try to pay him during the offseason, become one of the top paid running backs in all of football. Their offense is going to be focused and centered around him. There weren't enough touches last year for David Montgomery. He'll get those touches in Houston, where the Texans are likely to move on from Joe Mixon as well. So the Texans upgrade their backfield. The Lions save some money and obviously hand off more work to Jahmyr Gibbs. And we have another trade that obviously has big effects on both teams.
We talked about the Houston side of this earlier in the show. Dan, you like this move for Detroit?
No, but I understand it. We've talked about this with Detroit and this concept of, have they missed their Super Bowl window? Mm-hmm. And while you can have the appreciation for there's a great foundation built in Detroit, we're going to start to see this kind of happen as they've had this 3-year run where we've had unbelievable productive players that were cheap. And all those productive players are not going to be cheap anymore. Mm-hmm. Jahmyr Gibbs is obviously the first name that's going to come to mind. Jack Campbell is going to have to be paid. Branch is going to have to be paid. So, there's a lot of young players talent-wise on this team that Brad Holmes, their general manager, has done a great job of evaluating, and they've done a great job of developing. Now it's time to pay them. So it's almost like going to start this new cycle in Detroit again of, okay, we got to find a bunch of new young players again through that draft process that are as good as the ones we've had over the past 2 or 3 seasons, but also come at that expensive rate. I think this is just the beginning of some of this almost roster overturn in Detroit.
Yeah, that 2023 draft that they crushed, they're now paying the bill. You didn't even mention Sam Laporta. There's 4 guys from that class that they have to pay. To that end, we have new on NFL Live, some more movement out of Detroit. Lions releasing offensive lineman Graham Glasgow. That saves them $5.5 million against this year's salary cap as they start to undertake some of that work they need to do to get under. Plenty of other news to get to here. Adam, take us through the rest of your top stories today, starting with another trade the Houston Texans made today.
They sent Titus Howard to the Cleveland Browns in exchange for a 5th-round draft pick. The Browns are trying to rebuild their entire offensive line. Titus Howard will go fill one of the tackle spots as Houston continues to continually remake its offensive line. Titus Howard has a new extension in Cleveland, 2 years, $45 million, $22.5 million a year. And the Kansas City Chiefs have moved on from their right tackle, Jawan Taylor. A cap savings here of about $20 million against their cap. They'll look to find another tackle as Jawan Taylor now becomes a free agent. Obviously, the idea would be if they can't find a trade partner, that's not expected to happen. So he is expected to be released before the start of the league year. And the Washington Commanders have informed former Pro Bowl cornerback Marshawn Lattimore that they intend to release him before the start of the new league year. The release will save about $18.5 million against the cap. You'll remember all the hype that came along with the Commanders trading for Lattimore 2 seasons ago at the trade deadline from New Orleans. The Commanders felt like they had a rare opportunity with Jaden Daniels. They went for it. They reached the NFC Championship game, but a couple of years later, they're now moving on from Lattimore to save money against the cap. Lattimore will join a crowded cornerback free agent pool.
We'll see more moves like this as the week goes along and teams work to get under the cap ahead of free agency. More than 25,000 players have played in the NFL in the league's history, but only 240 of those have crossed the goal line into the end zone to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Over the next year, which is the year of the Super Bowl at ESPN, we're going to tell the stories of those players and the moments they achieved immortality on football's biggest stage. This week, Steve Smith Sr. explains how the moment he became the 140th player to score a touchdown in the Super Bowl was a childhood dream come true.